My name is Larissa Connor, 38 years old, and I never imagined the man I married would betray me in front of everyone we loved. It wasn't in a fight. It wasn't whispered in the dark or discovered in a text message. It was announced, clear and shameless, into a microphone, under blinding chandeliers, in front of 300 guests who had come to celebrate our wedding. I remember the clink of silverware dying down, the hush of the crowd as he stood. Guests leaned in, glasses raised, waiting for heartfelt vows of gratitude. Instead, they were about to hear the sentence that would split my world in half. "Larissa was never my first choice," he said, voice steady, almost proud. "But sometimes life gives you what you need, not what you want." Laughter scattered through the tables like firecrackers, uneasy, confused, a few sharp cackles from his friends. My stomach twisted, but I didn't flinch. Not yet. The spotlight bathed me in gold, pinning me to my chair like a specimen, forcing me to absorb every syllable as his words sliced through the air. "I had other dreams, other women," he continued, lifting his glass higher. "But in the end, I settled. And she accepted me." That word, settled, ripped through me like glass in the throat. Settled. As if I were a bargain deal. As if love were a consolation prize he reluctantly agreed to. Gasps rolled across the room, some stifled, others sharp. My maid of honor shifted uncomfortably, her hand twitching toward mine before pulling back, afraid to draw attention. His parents sat stiff as stone, their smiles frozen. And me. I sat in silence, my pulse hammering so loudly I was sure the whole room could hear it. The crystal stem of my wine glass dug into my palm. I thought if I squeezed hard enough, it might shatter, drown his voice, cut through the humiliation. But I stayed still, my face a mask, refusing to give him the collapse he wanted. He kept going. "Marriage isn't about passion, it's about practicality. And Larissa, well, she's practical." He smirked, pausing for effect. "Stable, a safe bet." The words ricocheted off marble walls, magnified by the sound system. The guests weren't just witnesses, they were accomplices to my undoing, their eyes flicking between us like spectators at a car crash. Inside me, a scream built, but I strangled it. Rage coiled tighter, sharper, until it no longer felt like pain but focus. Every second, every syllable etched itself into my memory like a brand. "Look at her," he said, gesturing toward me. His hand hovered, casual, like I was nothing more than furniture. "She stood by me when she didn't have to. And for that, I'm grateful. Grateful." Another knife twisted. Not loved, not cherished. Grateful. Like I was a nurse tending to a dying patient. The ballroom roared with applause, the kind people give out of habit when they don't know what else to do. My humiliation was sealed under thunderous clapping, and he drank it in like victory. I scanned the crowd, their faces blurred by chandeliers and shame. But then, across the room, I caught the sharp glint of a stare that didn't belong to a stranger. His best man. His so-called closest friend. His smile was too tight, his eyes too knowing, as if he had been waiting for this too. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a careless slip of arrogance. This was deliberate, planned. He wanted me broken, cornered, too humiliated to fight back. But he had no idea who he had just married. I lifted my glass, forcing a thin smile, and met his toast with one of my own. My voice didn't tremble when I said, "To settling." The room laughed uneasily again, but inside me, a different sound echoed. Quiet, steady, dangerous. The sound of a plan beginning to breathe. And as the applause died, I leaned back in my chair, my eyes fixed on the best man's knowing smirk. That was the first crack in his facade. The first secret begging to be pulled into the light. He thought this was his triumph. He thought I would shrink. But under that golden light, with 300 witnesses watching, I felt something else entirely. Cold. Calculated. Ready. Because if he had chosen to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew, then everyone we knew would also watch him fall. And the first thread of that unraveling was sitting right across the room, smirking into his champagne glass. Before that night, before his words turned me to stone, my life was almost painfully ordinary, but ordinary in a way that I had clung to like oxygen. Louisville isn't New York or Los Angeles. It doesn't glitter in the same way, but it has its rhythm. Bourbon on the weekends, Sunday services that last too long, and neighbors who wave even when they don't like you. I had carved out a small, steady corner of it for myself. At 38, I wasn't the woman who turned heads anymore, but I was the woman who held a room together. I worked as a project coordinator for a nonprofit downtown, wrangling impossible budgets and even more impossible egos. I had friends, people who trusted me. I had stability. And for most of my adult life, that was enough. Then came David Connor. We met at a fundraiser his family hosted. His parents owned half the bourbon distribution contracts in the state. Their name opened doors I didn't even know existed. I hadn't planned to catch his attention that night. I was busy sorting silent auction sheets and making sure the caterer didn't burn the mini crab cakes. But he noticed me anyway. Or at least, that's what I thought back then. He was polished, practiced, with that kind of easy confidence men wear when they've never been told no. A tailored suit, an expensive watch, a laugh that was just a little too loud. When he asked me to join him for dinner the following week, I felt like I had been chosen. Chosen. That word haunts me now. Our early days were filled with late-night drives along the Ohio River, shared bottles of wine, and whispered promises about the life we'd build. He said he admired my independence, how I didn't cling to him like others had. He told me I grounded him, that with me he could finally think about a future. I believed him. But even in those first months, there were cracks, small enough I ignored them. His impatience when I didn't answer his calls right away. The way he mocked my little rental house on the south side of town, saying, "You deserve better than this shoebox. One day I'll rescue you from here." He framed it like a compliment, but it always left me uneasy, like my life before him wasn't worth anything. He loved control, though he disguised it as care. He chose the restaurants, the wine, the vacation spots. When I once suggested we go hiking instead of staying at a resort, he laughed and said, "Sweetheart, you're too good for bug spray." Still, I convinced myself it was charm, not arrogance. My friends raised eyebrows. My mother, a sharp woman who had weathered her own share of disappointments, asked me once, "Are you happy, or just relieved someone finally picked you?" I brushed her off, defensive, unwilling to examine the truth in her words. Because with David, everything looked better from the outside. He dressed me in expensive clothes, paraded me through charity events, introduced me as the woman who keeps me sane. For the first time, I wasn't just Larissa from the nonprofit. I was Mrs. Connor-to-be. And yet, behind the polished veneer, there were moments that clung like shadows. The night he dismissed one of my ideas in front of his colleagues with a smirk. "Larissa's a dreamer. Good thing I'm the practical one." The afternoon he told me not to laugh so loud at a restaurant. "It's not elegant." The way he tightened his grip on my waist at parties, steering me through crowds as if I were another accessory he owned. But I silenced the doubt. I told myself I was lucky. 38 and finally stepping into the kind of life people envied. I convinced myself that his confidence would protect me, not cage me. We planned a wedding that matched his family's grandeur. The Galt House ballroom, chandeliers, 300 guests, most of them his, not mine. I picked a dress that shimmered under the lights, ivory silk that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I belonged at his side. And when people asked if I was nervous, I laughed. Nervous? No. I was certain. At least I thought I was. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. My dress hung in the closet, the veil draped like a ghost over the chair. I wandered into the kitchen for water and saw his laptop open on the counter. The screen glowed with a draft. His speech. Curious, I leaned closer. He had written it in bullet points. Thank family, thank friends, joke about Larissa not being first choice, end with practical, stable, safe bet. I froze. My throat closed, eyes blurring over the words. I told myself it had to be a joke, some misguided attempt at humor he would never actually use. My hands trembled as I shut the laptop, forcing myself to breathe. I climbed back into bed, pressed against his sleeping body, and whispered excuses into the dark. He didn't mean it. He wouldn't actually say it. Not tomorrow. Not in front of everyone. I convinced myself to forget. But forgetting doesn't erase. It festers. And that draft, the one I dismissed as a bad joke, wasn't just a hint. It was the blueprint of the humiliation he would deliver, word for word, into a microphone under golden chandeliers. The first red flag. The start of the end. When I tell you I remember every second of that night, I mean it. The sound of his voice still ricochets in my skull, the way each word landed like a hammer on glass. Larissa was never my first choice. The ballroom fell into a silence so sharp, I swear I could hear the chandeliers buzzing overhead. My breath locked in my chest. My lips parted, but no sound came out. 300 faces turned toward me, pity in some, amusement in others. I was frozen, a statue in a silk gown, while my husband smiled like he had just delivered the punchline of the century. He paused, sipping his champagne, letting the weight of his words linger. He wanted me to feel the silence, to drown in it. Then he leaned into the microphone, voice steady, practiced. But sometimes life doesn't give you your dreams. It gives you what you need. Larissa was what I needed. The crowd chuckled uneasily. I caught the sharp laugh of his college friend at the back table, the one who had never hidden his disdain for me. My cheeks burned, but my spine refused to bend. Inside, though, a scream clawed at my throat. I thought of the draft I had found on his laptop the night before. The bullet points, the exact phrasing. This wasn't a careless slip. He had written it, planned it, rehearsed it. I wanted to stand, to shout, to claw the microphone from his hand and tear his mask apart. But my body betrayed me. I sat stiff, my heart pounding so violently I thought it would crack my ribs. He continued, savoring every word. Larissa is practical. She's stable. She's safe. She may not be the fiery passion I once chased, but she's reliable. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I chose her. Chose. As if he had lowered himself, extended mercy to a woman unworthy of him. Applause broke again, louder this time, covering my humiliation like dirt over a coffin. Guests clinked glasses, toasted our union, while I drowned silently. I searched the crowd for refuge, but there was none. My maid of honor stared at the floor. My co-workers whispered behind napkins. My mother's lips pressed into a razor-thin line, her eyes saying, "I warned you." And then there was the best man. His smirk widened, like he knew this was coming all along. Like this wasn't just David's cruelty, but a shared joke between them. My stomach twisted. What else had they shared? My fingers dug into my lap, nails biting through silk. I forced my face still, because breaking here would mean giving him exactly what he wanted. Proof that I was fragile, weak, breakable. But inside, something shifted. As he basked in the applause, I saw him for who he truly was. Not a husband, not a partner, not even a man. Just a performer, hungry for approval, even if it meant cutting his bride to pieces on her wedding night. And I realized, this was never about me. It was about control. He had paraded me like a trophy, and now he was branding me as less than him, ensuring everyone knew he held the upper hand. The speech dragged on. He thanked his parents for their support, his friends for always keeping him grounded, his colleagues for believing in him. My name barely passed his lips again, except as the subject of jokes. How I wasn't a morning person, how I couldn't cook, how I cried at movies he thought were ridiculous. Each detail framed not as affection, but as a flaw he endured. And the room laughed with him. My body shook under the tablecloth, a storm locked inside porcelain skin. Grief and rage tangled together until I could no longer tell which was which. When he finally sat, sliding the microphone back to the DJ like a conqueror. He turned to me with a satisfied grin. He leaned close enough for only me to hear. "Don't pout, sweetheart. They'll forget this part tomorrow." I stared at him, my lips trembling with restraint. Forget? He had carved humiliation into the memory of every guest in that room. And he knew it. The rest of the night unfolded like a nightmare on rails. Guests danced, laughed, toasted. They congratulated me with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Whispers trailed behind me everywhere I moved. I caught fragments. Settled for her? Practical? Safe bet. He twirled me on the dance floor, his hand gripping my waist with ownership, not love. Cameras flashed, capturing what looked like joy, but felt like chains tightening. Inside, I burned. Hours later, in the hotel suite he had booked for our wedding night, he poured himself bourbon and loosened his tie. "You're quiet," he said casual, as if he hadn't gutted me in public. I stared at him. "Why did you say that?" He sipped, shrugging. "Say what?" "That I wasn't your first choice, that you settled." He smirked. "Because it's true, and because it's funny. You take yourself too seriously, Larissa. People like a joke." A joke. My life, my marriage, my dignity, reduced to punchlines in his speech. Tears stung, but I swallowed them down. He didn't deserve them. "Don't look at me like that," he added, setting the glass down with a clink. "You should be grateful. Do you know how many women would kill to be in your shoes? To have my last name? To live in my world?" His world, not ours. His. That was the moment it crystallized. This wasn't arrogance. This wasn't carelessness. This was strategy. He had scripted my role from the beginning. Humble, grateful, silent. The wife who knew her place. And by humiliating me on day one, he ensured I would never forget it. But he had miscalculated. Because as I lay awake beside him that night, staring into the dark, a thought rooted itself deep in my chest. If he had chosen to make me small in front of everyone, then I would destroy him in front of everyone, not with tears, not with begging, but with precision, with calculation, with the kind of cold vengeance he would never see coming. My grief hardened into something sharper, something lethal. And in the silence of that suite, while he slept off his bourbon, I made my first promise as a wife. I would not forgive. I would not forget. I would ruin him. The morning after our wedding, I woke up in the suite with sunlight cutting through the curtains like blades. David was sprawled across the bed, shirt half open, snoring softly as if the night before had been nothing more than a performance he'd already forgotten. For him, it was. For me, it was a scar I could feel under my skin. I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom. The mirror didn't lie. Puffy eyes, lipstick smeared, a veil of exhaustion draped over my face. But beneath it, something new stared back at me. Not weakness, not despair. Something colder. He thought he had won. He thought his words had cemented me as the safe, practical choice who would never fight back. He believed the humiliation had bound me tighter to him. That was his mistake. When he finally stirred, he stretched like a king in his chamber. "Morning, Mrs. Connor," he said lazily, voice thick with self-satisfaction. "Big day yesterday." I watched him sip coffee, scroll through congratulatory texts, bask in attention. Every detail screamed arrogance. He didn't see me. He saw the role he'd cast me in, the grateful wife, the quiet shadow to his shining spotlight. "Larissa," he said, "don't brood about last night. They laughed, they clapped. It was fine. Fine. My public humiliation reduced to fine. I'll get used to your sense of humor," I murmured. My voice was flat, but he heard only submission. He grinned. "That's my girl." And with that, the last piece of doubt snapped. He didn't just underestimate me, he erased me. To him, I was already conquered, too dependent to leave, too wounded to fight. That certainty of his would be my weapon. In the days that followed, I played my part. I smiled for photos, sent thank you notes to guests, posted the curated snapshots he demanded, me in my dress, him with his arm around me, captions about love and forever. Everyone saw the illusion, and he believed it too. But behind closed doors, I watched. I listened. I took note of every habit, every arrogance, every careless slip. He came home late, reeking of bourbon, muttering about meetings that didn't exist. He left receipts crumpled in his pockets from dinners I hadn't attended. He left his laptop open, emails flashing with names I didn't recognize. He trusted me not to look, not to question. He trusted me because he thought I was broken. At dinners, he talked over me, bragged about our future, our status. "Larissa will learn," he'd say to colleagues, as if I weren't sitting right there. His friends laughed, his parents nodded approvingly. And every time, I smiled. Because now, I wasn't his wife. I was his shadow. And shadows see everything. I started small. A note scribbled in my planner when he mentioned an unfamiliar name. A photo snapped of his receipts before I tossed them away. Passwords he typed into his phone while drunk. Digits reflected faintly in the window glass. Piece by piece, I began collecting. Not because I needed proof of his betrayal, I already had that. But because if I was going to destroy him, it couldn't just be emotional. It had to be absolute. One night, 2 weeks after the wedding, he stumbled in late. I was at the desk, supposedly lost in work. He leaned down, kissed the top of my head perfunctorily and said, "Don't stay up too late, sweetheart. You've got no idea how exhausting real responsibility is." My jaw tightened. I waited until he disappeared into the bedroom, then opened my notebook. Date, time, his words, his actions. The page filled slowly, each line another thread in the net I was weaving. He thought he was untouchable, but I was already documenting every flaw in his armor. And the more he boasted, the more careless he became. At a dinner with his parents, he laughed about how he had broken me in early. At a party, he joked with his best man that I was house-trained. They laughed, and he looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I gave him none. That silence fed his ego and blinded him further. But inside, I was building something sharp, something patient. It wasn't enough to leave him. It wasn't enough to scream the truth into the void. He had stolen my dignity in public, and so in public, I would reclaim it. I wanted more than justice. I wanted spectacle. And so, while he slept, I traced his routines like blueprints. I mapped his movements. I studied the people in his orbit, the best man with the 2 knowing eyes, the colleagues he bragged to, the family he craved approval from. They weren't bystanders. They were the audience for his downfall. The decision was made. I would burn his carefully constructed world, not in a blaze of passion, but in a slow, deliberate fire where every ember was a truth he had hidden, every flame a consequence he couldn't outrun. And the best part? He would never see it coming, because as he kissed me goodnight, murmuring empty promises, I was already writing the script of his destruction. And this time, the only microphone in the room would be mine. I learned quickly that revenge isn't about rage. Rage is loud, reckless, easy to spot. Real revenge requires silence, precision, and patience. The kind of patience David would never expect from me. The first step was information. He thought he controlled the narrative, but I controlled access. His phone lay charging on the nightstand most nights, buzzing with messages he never bothered to hide. He assumed I wouldn't dare look. He was wrong. One night, while he showered, I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling with steady fingers. A thread of texts glowed against the screen. Messages between him and a woman named Rachel. Flirtations, late-night rendezvous, even plans that overlapped with the business meetings he'd bragged about. My hands trembled, but not from heartbreak. This was fuel. Evidence. I photographed everything. Screenshots saved, emailed to an account he didn't know existed. My secret vault. The laptop was next. He left it carelessly on the dining table, drunk on bourbon and his own arrogance. I waited until he passed out on the couch, then opened the lid. Password: his birthday. Predictable. Inside, I found spreadsheets, company accounts, expense reports, invoices. At first glance, nothing unusual. But the deeper I dug, the more patterns emerged. Double payments, phantom vendors, transfers to an offshore account. My practical mind, the same one he mocked, pieced together the trail of fraud he had been building under his family's business. I copied files onto a flash drive, tucked it inside a hollow book on my shelf. My hands shook the entire time, not from fear of discovery, but from the intoxicating realization. He wasn't just cruel. He was sloppy. But sloppy men are dangerous too. Twice I nearly got caught. The first time, he came home early while I was rifling through his desk drawer. I barely had time to shove the documents back and sit at the kitchen table, pretending to sort mail. His eyes narrowed, but then he laughed. Finally organizing something around here? Good girl. He kissed the top of my head and poured himself a drink, never suspecting I had nearly uncovered his second phone hidden beneath the folders. The second time was worse. His best man, Matt, dropped by unannounced. I had his laptop open, scanning through an email chain about falsified contracts. I snapped the lid shut just as Matt stepped inside. He looked at me too long, his smirk a mirror of that night at the wedding. "Careful, Larissa," he said, eyes glinting. "You might see something you don't like." My blood ran cold. Did he know? Was he in on it? His casual tone told me he was baiting me, testing my reaction. I forced a laugh, shrugged, and said, "Trust me, nothing on there is worth my time." He seemed satisfied, but his smirk lingered long after he left. That night, I wrote his name at the top of a fresh page in my notebook. Matt, liability, possible accomplice. The deeper I went, the more pieces I collected. A recording of David mocking me to his friends at a bar, captured by a microphone on my phone I'd left in his jacket pocket. Screenshots of messages where he called me dead weight and bragged about locking down a safe option for his image. Bank records tying him to fraudulent transfers that, if revealed, could ruin not just his reputation, but his family's entire empire. Piece by piece, I built a cage around him. But revenge isn't only about evidence. It's about timing. A scandal dropped in private could be silenced, spun, buried. But if revealed at the right moment, in the right setting, it becomes irreversible. That's when the idea came. His birthday. David's family threw lavish celebrations every year, grander than some weddings. Politicians, business partners, family friends, everyone who mattered would be there. He craved that spotlight more than air. What better place to dismantle him than in front of the very people whose approval he worshipped? The thought electrified me. I began rehearsing my mask. Smiles for the camera, laughter at his jokes, hands placed delicately on his arm. I had to be the doting wife until the very last second. Any crack in my performance, and suspicion might creep in. And I practiced my silence. He humiliated me with words. I would destroy him with evidence that spoke for itself. Weeks passed, each day sharpening my plan. I secured a small projector from a friend at work, told her it was for a charity presentation. I tested it late at night when David was gone, learning how to cast images onto a screen, how to switch between files seamlessly. I created a folder, neatly labeled, organized, containing everything: his texts with Rachel, the offshore transfers, the recordings of his laughter at my expense. Each file was a blade, honed and ready. But even blades need a stage. The ballroom at the Galt house was already booked for his birthday. I volunteered to help with the arrangements, smiling sweetly as I offered suggestions for music, lighting, seating. He smirked, thinking I was finally embracing the role of his supportive wife. He had no idea I was arranging the angles, the timing, the perfect reveal. The closer the date came, the more reckless he grew. He bragged louder, flaunted Rachel more boldly. Once, I caught a whiff of perfume on his jacket. Feminine, unfamiliar. He didn't even bother hiding it. "You'll get used to this world," he told me smug when I confronted him casually. "Women like Rachel, they come and go. But you, Larissa, you're permanent. Permanent. His anchor, his trophy, his safe bet." That night, I slipped the flash drive into my clutch and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked the same. Same brown eyes, same dark hair pulled neatly back. But inside, I was unrecognizable. This wasn't the woman he mocked in his speech. This was the woman holding his life's strings in her hands. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt something close to peace. Because I knew. When the chandeliers lit up the ballroom, when the applause rang out for his grand entrance, I would already be waiting in the shadows with his entire world on a silver platter. The plan was complete. All that was left was execution. The night of David's birthday arrived wrapped in the kind of spectacle he craved. The ballroom at the Galt House shimmered with gold, champagne towers glistening under chandeliers, tables dressed in white linen and orchids. His parents had spared no expense, as always. Politicians, business partners, family friends, everyone who mattered in his orbit was there. He thrived in rooms like this, strutting from guest to guest with his glass raised, his laugh echoing across the marble floors. I followed 2 steps behind, smiling at the right moments, nodding on cue. My mask was flawless. Inside, though, I was coiled steel. Tucked in my clutch, disguised among lipstick and perfume, was the flash drive. My arsenal. When the time came, no one here would leave without knowing who David Connor really was. Dinner passed in a blur, speeches rolled one after another, his father boasting about the family legacy, his mother praising his leadership, colleagues toasting his charm. My pulse never faltered. I laughed when they laughed, raised my glass when they did, my smile never cracking. And then, finally, it was his turn. The lights dimmed, a spotlight followed him to the stage. He mounted the steps like a king ascending a throne, adjusting his tie with theatrical precision. "Thank you, everyone," he began, voice smooth, confident. 39 years, and I've only just begun." The crowd clapped, hanging on every word. He launched into his speech. Gratitude for his parents, appreciation for his colleagues, jokes at his own expense. He was in his element, polished and practiced. And then, as if rehearsed for my benefit, he gestured toward me. And of course, my wife Larissa, the best decision I ever made, even if she wasn't my first choice. Laughter erupted. He said it again. The line that had humiliated me on our wedding night, delivered now as a party trick. I felt the burn in my chest, but this time, no collapse followed. This time, I was ready. I rose slowly from my chair. My movements drew eyes, curious at first, then confused. David's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Ah, my wife," he said into the microphone, his tone smug. "Would you like to say a few words?" "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, slicing through the room. "I would." The DJ moved to hand me another microphone, but I shook my head. Instead, I crossed to the projector I had arranged under the guise of a birthday surprise. My fingers slid the flash drive into the port. The screen behind him flickered to life. First slide, a text message. "Can't wait to see you tonight. She's clueless." "David." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Laughter died instantly. David spun toward the screen, face blanching. "Larissa, what is this?" I didn't answer. Another slide appeared. More messages. "Rachel, you're the fire. She's just the anchor. Don't worry, she'll never leave. I've broken her in." The room buzzed with shock. His colleagues whispered. His mother's hand shot to her mouth. "Turn it off!" David barked, panic cracking his voice. But I wasn't done. The next slide showed offshore transfers, bank statements with his name, payments to phantom vendors, money siphoned from his family's company into accounts abroad. His father lurched forward, face red. "David, what is this?" The room spun with whispers, eyes darting between the screen and him. The illusion of his perfection shattered with each click. And then came the recording. His voice, slurred with bourbon, laughing to his friends at a bar. Larissa. She's nothing. Just a placeholder. A safe bet. The kind of woman you marry when you're done chasing real women. The sound filled the room, undeniable. Guests stiffened, jaws dropping. Some shook their heads in disgust. David lunged toward me, his face twisted in rage. "Stop this! Now!" But two security guards, ones I had quietly arranged through the event staff, stepped between us. "Ma'am?" one asked. "Play it all," I said. And they did. Slide after slide, clip after clip. His fraud, his infidelity, his cruelty, laid bare in front of everyone he respected, everyone whose approval he worshipped. His empire cracked in real time. His mother sobbed quietly into her hands. His father turned away, muttering, "You've ruined us." His colleagues backed toward the exits, their eyes filled with calculation, distancing themselves from a sinking ship. The best man, Matt, tried to laugh it off. "Come on, folks. This is—" But then the next slide appeared, an email exchange between him and David. Planning cover-ups, mocking me, splitting profits. The laughter curdled into silence. Matt's face drained white. I turned to the crowd, finally speaking. "You've all toasted him, praised him, celebrated him. But this is who David Connor really is. A liar. A thief. A fraud." And he thought I would stay silent. Gasps gave way to murmurs, anger, disgust. David's mask crumbled. He slammed a fist on the podium, his voice breaking. "This is manipulation. She's crazy, jealous." But no one looked convinced. The evidence spoke louder than he ever could. And then came the final blow. The last slide appeared, one I had debated including, but knew would leave no way back. A screenshot of an email to Rachel. "When my father passes, the company is mine. Larissa's name on the will seals the deal. She's too stupid to see it. She'll hand me everything, and then I'll be free." The silence that followed was cavernous. His father staggered, clutching the table for balance. His mother wept openly. The guests stared at David with disgust, horror, betrayal. And David, my husband, collapsed onto the podium, his hands gripping the wood like it might save him from drowning. There was no recovery, no spinning this. Not when the proof was projected 20 feet high for every eye to see. I stepped forward, calm, deliberate, my heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. "You said I was your safe bet," I said softly, my voice carrying through the microphone he had dropped. "But you forgot. Safe bets don't lose. And tonight, David, you've lost everything." I left the stage then, my clutch swinging at my side, the projector still flickering behind me. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence was louder than applause, filled with the sound of his empire collapsing in real time. And as I walked out into the night, I didn't look back. Because I didn't have to. He was finished. The night of David's birthday ended not with cheers, but with the hollow scrape of chairs and the shuffle of shoes. Guests fled the ballroom like survivors of a shipwreck, avoiding eye contact, whispering names of lawyers, accountants, investigators. David slumped at the podium, his once perfect suit crumpled, his face pale under the unforgiving chandeliers. His father didn't help him down. His mother didn't touch his shoulder. They both turned their backs, their dynasty crumbling with him. And me. I walked out calm, deliberate, the air of Louisville cool against my skin. For the first time since my wedding, I felt light. The fallout was immediate. By morning, the Connor name was splashed across headlines. Local heir exposed. Fraud, infidelity, betrayal at birthday gala. The videos had gone viral. Guests couldn't resist recording the spectacle. Clips of David's face as the evidence rolled behind him were replayed on every screen. His family's business took the first hit. Clients pulled out, contracts were canceled, partners demanded investigations. Within a week, auditors swarmed their offices. The offshore accounts I had exposed were traced, and funds were frozen. The empire his father had built for decades was now rotting under the spotlight. And David? He tried to fight. He called reporters, insisted it was all fabricated, begged friends to vouch for him. But no one wanted to be tied to his sinking ship. Even Matt vanished, his own complicity revealed on the projector. The man who once thrived on attention now couldn't step outside without whispers slicing him open. I watched from a distance. Every headline, every ruined contract, every betrayal from the people he thought loyal. It was justice unfolding in real time. But revenge is never just about what happens to them. It's about what happens to you. People began to approach me differently. Strangers on the street offered quiet nods. Whispers of, "Good for you," slipped into my ear at the grocery store. My mother hugged me longer than she had in years, her voice low. "I told you he wasn't worth it, but you made sure he'll never forget you." I went back to work at the nonprofit. My life smaller on the surface, but steadier. I no longer felt like the woman who had been humiliated into silence. I had taken back my narrative, and I wore it like armor. David, though, was unraveling. He lost his job. His family stripped his access to accounts. His friends ghosted him. Rachel, the mistress, disappeared the moment the story broke. He was left with nothing but the echo of applause that had once followed him everywhere. And then came the knock. Investigators. Fraud charges. The offshore accounts were enough to open federal cases. He wasn't just disgraced, he was trapped. The last time I saw him in person was in the courthouse lobby. He was thinner, paler, his hair unkempt. The man who once strutted through ballrooms now hunched in a wrinkled suit, avoiding cameras that swarmed him like vultures. His eyes found mine across the marble floor. For a second, I thought I saw hate. But no, it wasn't hate. It was recognition. The realization that I had been the one to dismantle him piece by piece. He opened his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to curse. But I turned away before he could speak. Some words aren't worth hearing. That should have been enough. But life isn't neat. And revenge, once lit, rarely burns out cleanly. Weeks later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. David, sitting in a diner booth, his head bowed. Across from him sat Matt. Written on the back in David's handwriting, "This isn't over." I stared at the photo for a long time. Fear should have risen in me. But instead, I laughed. A low, cold laugh that surprised even me. Because David hadn't learned. Even in ruin, he clung to conspiracies, to the idea that he could rebuild from ashes. But what he didn't know was that the envelope had arrived the same day I met with the lead investigator. I handed them the photo, the handwriting, the implication of collusion. And that was the final twist of the knife. Not only had I destroyed him once, he had handed me the weapon to finish the job himself. The last I heard, David Connor was awaiting trial, denied bail, his name a curse whispered through the halls of the same city that once adored him. His family severed ties, his inheritance stripped, his empire gone. And me? I walked through Louisville free, not healed, not soft, but victorious. Because he was right about one thing. I wasn't his first choice. I was his last mistake. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck a chord, I'd love to hear your thoughts, or even your own experiences, down in the comments. Your voice is what keeps this community alive. And if you haven't already, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. A simple like also helps more people find these tales of justice and consequence. I truly appreciate your time here, and I can't wait to share the next one with you.